Now let's shift gears a bit and bring attention to our upcoming panel discussion, which is going to be on the topic A Little Rebellion, Marketing in Changing Times and the Need to Think Differently. The marketing industry is evolving quickly. One size fits all is a thing of the past. Brands must thoroughly comprehend their target market to personalize their messaging. Our upcoming panel discussion will discuss how organizations can stay relevant in the current market by taking risks and rethinking how they interact with customers. Give a huge round of applause to Perry Rearick, Chief Editor of VertMarkets, Maurice Davis, Head of Marketing at Marketing Growth Strategy, and Aaron King, Founder and CEO of DraftR, to help us get a thorough understanding of the subject. Let's welcome our panelists.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. You are not going to regret a minute of it. And you know, it's kind of like the fact that it's 3:10 in the afternoon and you're here is like making it, you know, all the way to the far side drop down of the web page, right? You're all the way in there. So thank you very much for still being in there and hanging in with us. So we are all rebellious. Okay, it may not look like it's not going to be a violent rebellion, so you don't have to worry about that.
Maybe.
Okay, I'm not stopping him if he gets violent, so be careful. Keep an eye on him. But I thought we'd take a minute or two, and we're going to introduce ourselves. Okay, Aaron, you want to begin?
Sure thing. Yeah, my name's Aaron King. I run a tech startup called DraftR, and we have a services side of the business called DraftR Media, and we do a lot of documentary-style content creation. Do a lot of branding. Worked with brands like Uber in the early days. We're part of YouTube Super Bowl commercial a couple of years ago. And then I create a lot of social media content, even with my personal brand under the name Deep Snap for a lot of outdoor stuff and work with a lot of outdoor brands. But it's all about storytelling for us.
Nice.
I'm Maurice. I work with businesses, helping them produce their podcasts for the purposes of generating business and building their brands in a medium that allows for education. So taking away the work from actually doing the production, the editing, and the post-production distribution, we squirrel that away and coach them on how to get more listeners, more viewers for their podcast.
Thanks, guys. I'm Perry Rearick. I am the owner of Mungadai Marketing, and I'm also the chief editor of a publication called Follow Your Buyer. It's a digital publication for B2B marketing and sales professionals. And I serve mostly people in the life sciences space, very complex, really long sales cycles, 18 months sometimes, really long. They're contractual, but they're more partnerships that could last for years. Think of all the people that were, you know, working the oars and getting COVID vaccines developed, manufactured and distributed. That would be right where we work. So we are rebels, but we are rebels with a cause, okay? And so if you can determine the background of this is a challenge. If you can determine the background, the first person to come to me after this and tell me the background of this photo and what it means, I will buy you a beverage of your choice at the 1923 Speakeasy. How's that for a deal? That'll be a good reward. So we are rebels with a cause, and the cause, we have a purpose, okay? And what's changing, that was mentioned in the introduction, is buyer behavior. Buyer behavior, our prospects, how they make purchasing decisions is radically different. They are far more informed than they were 30, 20, 10 years ago. According to Gartner, which does a lot of research on buyer behavior, 83% of the complex purchasing decision, the buyer's journey, is completed before they ever reveal themselves to a seller. And so you have to be in that space, delivering content appropriate for that early part of the buyer's journey in order to be competitive, all right? Now, that's hard to explain in an elevator pitch, all right? We were talking about this for the past 2 days. It's a challenge to get, to explain that to somebody. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with a video. It's a commercial by Chevy. Now, okay, it's a car commercial, so there's music, okay? It's a classic rock song. So by all means, sing along when you hear it. You're gonna wanna do that. I'm going to sing, I can't control myself. So just take a look at this.
I'm sorry, I missed my cue.
From Bolt to Blazer, Equinox to Silverado, Chevy EVs are for everyone, everywhere.
So you may have seen this commercial. Oh, by the way, that song is going to be in your head for like several days. Okay, you're going to be singing that to yourself, and it's a wonderful song. By the way, it's from 1987. So this is a by the way moment. It's from 1987. It's a Fleetwood Mac song. It was written by Christine McVie, who sadly passed away several weeks ago, but she lives on in the gifts she's given us. That went back on the charts back in September when this commercial was introduced. So this is Chevy introducing their electric vehicles for 2023. And you go, well, it's a car, it's music, you know, what's the big deal? The vast majority of car ads and commercials focus on the product. So what does that mean? Well, Chevy could have lined up all their EVs, opened the hoods, I showed you the absence of an engine, right? And they would have had an engineer in development explain all the technology that went into it. Instead, they take us inside the car. All right, who hasn't ridden with some friends to a sporting event? All right, going out with your family, go hiking with your besties, right? Hang out with your bros. A song comes on the radio, you turn it up and you start singing and dancing, right? They immerse us in the lives of the customer. They're projecting an understanding of the customer. They know what we love, right? And they're taking us there, and they barely mention the car at the very end. They really don't mention anything at all. That's the kind of rebellion we're talking about, all right? Focusing entirely on the prospect, the customer, the potential buyer in all of this. Now, that's happening because buyers are much more informed. And in the early buyer's decision, and you've heard the Gen Z panel that was up here, and many others have mentioned how people are not just looking at features and benefits anymore. They want to know, you know, who are you? What are you about? Why do you do what you do? What's your meaning in this world? Okay, and is it fit with me? Okay, and that's who they're reaching through this. So that's the big challenge that marketers have. All right, that's what's facing us. So I'm going to go to Maurice. So Maurice has a superpower, okay? His superpower is, so if you talk to an old school, I'm a boomer, okay? I'm in that generation, all right? If you talk to somebody my age and they talk about sales and what's the ideal salesperson, I'm going to say grit, hanging in there, always be closing, okay? That is gone. That world is gone. There's still people doing it and they're really struggling. Now it's empathy. And Maurice's superpower is customer empathy. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about what that means, why it's important, and how you go about that.
Yeah, thank you. It wasn't until being here that my superpower was articulated as customer empathy. So now I can put that on my website, right? So thinking about why that's so important is it helps us realize that everything that we thought about the touch points that we're doing, the directions that we're going, have to change perspective. One of the things that I'll do with my clients a lot of times is we'll do what's called the we-me ratio, right? So we'll go on their website and we'll just look for find the word we, me, us, right? And then do the opposite for find the word you, right? And oftentimes what we'll find is that there's a ton more of this we concept. And it's really easy to see that much of the marketing that we're doing is really focused on what I want as the business owner or what I want as the company. I want you to buy my product, I want you to buy my service, and here's why it's important to us as the business, and less on how this improves your life and how this is going to take away the pain, the stress, the frustration. And you all know this, right? And so don't fall asleep yet. The point I'm driving home is that we know it, but we still do it the wrong way. And so we got to really put our feet to the fire. And when we're writing these blog posts or when we're writing our websites or when we're creating our podcast, oftentimes we slip into me and doing simple things like, hey, if I were someone that was about to buy this and doing that we test, what you'll realize is that I'm not doing as good as I could be, and you don't have to pay crazy amount of money to do it. It's just something simple.
Yeah. I love your we me drill that you go through. It is be prepared to feel embarrassed if you do that, because boy, we do that all the time. We want to talk about ourselves.
It's pretty crazy. Like we've taken clients and I've helped them do copywriting, and this is something that we just do because, right? We get a customer and I'm like, I can't help you because it's so bad, right? Like we got to spend some time on this, even though this is not what my team does. But the drastic change when you cannot use the word me, like what that forces you to do with your language, what you'll realize is, like we talk about the feature benefit thing, when you're not talking about yourself, it gets harder to phrase how something is good when you're not saying we do X, right? Just try it, right? Don't take my word for it. On lunch, on break, take a couple sentences on your website, do a control find for we, and just try to rephrase it, right? Because you'll be blown away by how much more punchy that copy will be just by shifting your perspective from what I want to I can't use this word anymore, and how do I rephrase it to take those words out?
Yeah, that is so powerful. It is buyers. So I'm going to use the word buyer, prospect, customer, kind of all the same. You know, it's an external audience that we're trying to reach, that we want to do business with, right? They want to see themselves in your content, and and in about 3 seconds they need to see themselves, or they're moving on, right? What kind of initial results do you get when you do that first change in how people are projecting their value?
Yeah, so if we're talking like social media content, last week we did a couple of tests and we had about a 70% lift on views and interaction.
70%.
70%.
All right, so that's a pencil drop. That's like, holy man.
70% on views and interaction. Creative didn't change, just wording, right? And so we'll continue to test it and vary up creative, but that was our first initial test from last week. Yeah. We've done some website, some testing on a client where she does business automation. She saw about a 30% increase in conversion to appointment. And then we've done some work with clients on some e-com stuff. We've done this we thing, and they saw about a 2% increase in conversion. And we all know e-com is challenging, but they saw a pretty decent lift. And again, small change in changing the way they talk about and think about the way that they write their content.
Great stuff. And it's hard to do because it's a mental shift for us.
Yes, which is what makes the control find so powerful, because you just write it the way you're going to write it, right? You don't have to change your mindset about how you write it. Just write what you want to write and then go back and think about, so typically I'll do here's what we do, here's what I can do, here's what our company does, right? Those are probably the 3 primary sentences that you'll find. So if you just do control finds for those 3 and then try to rephrase them, obviously you're not going to be able to take them all out because it doesn't make sense. But if you can lower that ratio, you'll get some good results.
But if the abandonment's within the first few seconds, you can put that stuff about yourself a little later.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about that for intent, right? If somebody's going to your about page, they want to know about you, and I don't want to take up a ton of time. So.
Well, piggybacking off of that, though, when you talk about yourself, when humans talk about ourselves, it activates the same part of our brain that food and money does. So we're naturally innate driven to do that. And so that's why we just immediately start talking about ourselves. And so it's a learned technique, it's a learned muscle you have to develop to really try to get that empathy that you're talking about.
Yeah, is anybody going to be offended if I curse? Yeah, your customers don't give a shit about you. Just real, right? Real moment. They don't care. So I wrote a book about networking a few years back, and that was kind of the primary thing is when you go to networking events, and we're about to all transition to a networking event, no one cares what you do. What they care about is, are you willing to take my business card? And if you're willing to take my business card, then you're a cool person. And if you just shut up and let them like spew about everything that they want, they will walk away and be like, oh my God, this person is amazing. And I've tested it in real life. I've had so many people ask me to teach networking sessions because of how good I was at a networking event, but they can only tell you like 3 things about me. They don't know me, right? And it's because they were like, you're just such a great listener. Well, it's because I didn't talk to you. I just asked you questions, right? And it's because, like you said, we're innately selfish. Right? Let's just keep it real.
Powerful, good stuff. Aaron, you are so you're a creator. You're a creator of businesses. You create growth for other people's businesses. You create incredible content, just compelling stuff. How has this buyer's journey, this change in buyer behavior, affected your storytelling style?
Yeah, we've really just focused on the customer more and more, and it's really not even about the product. We say to a lot of our clients that marketing is about why should I care, brands, why should I trust you? And so you have these different segments. And there's this one client we have where storytelling is the only thing we do. They do some billboards locally. So it's a small town cattle feed company in Texas. There's 5 locations. Most people in Texas haven't heard of it, let alone anywhere outside of that. And all we do on their social media is we interview elder cowboys. So we get these guys that are 95, 100 years old that lived through the Great Depression, and all they do is talk about how I fed cattle back in the 1930s, what it was like riding a wagon from Llano, Texas to Austin. Don't talk about feed. We don't talk about anything. And people are like Googling, who is this brand? They go viral on a regular basis. It's a small town cattle feed company. We've gotten 30 million views on this content.
That's incredible.
And so you'll have a 100-year-old cowboy on TikTok, which does not match, right? It's the millennial or that Gen Z, whatever, just dancing, all this stuff. 7 million views, on a guy who's just talking about saddling up. They were stirrup high and just like having a good time. And people are in the DMs like, do you guys ship to Oklahoma? Can I? And they're shipping hats to Germany. They're shipping hats everywhere because their brand's strong. And it's a small town feed company. All we do is tell stories. People don't care what they're selling, but they want to buy it. And so we've been doing that over and over. And on my personal account, now people are starting to understand like the brands, because I would tell them, hey, just give me your product. Let's just make some cool content. Trust me. That didn't really work on the sales pitch. I did it kind of in casual and passing. And they're like, whatever. Well, one of those brands was like, here's a chair. Make a TikTok. Cool. 30 million views. And there's no words in the video. So then they hit me up and they're like, our website's going nuts. And there's best practices that go with this. Now, yes, it's great to go viral. That's great for top of funnel recognition. But then there's the best practices that go with it. So all that traffic goes to your site. Are you capturing the emails? And what does your retargeting look like? So you're talking, we don't do digital marketing. So we don't deploy ad spend or anything like that. We're purely storytelling and do the creative. But we'll work with people that manage the digital. And so the creative is where you can have those numbers get better. So if you're driving traffic to your site from a campaign or a viral video, the question is always, okay, that's great. How does it help me sell whatever? Like I got a bunch of eyeballs on TikTok. Yeah. I got how does it help me sell? And maybe the conversions aren't super high on that day. But if you have pixels in place and you're running retargeting, the creative should reflect what drove that traffic in the first place. And so you're gonna have that familiarization. And so you think about it like any brand rep, like Allstate now and Flo from Progressive, they have a face attached to a brand more and more and more. And that's why we do influencer marketing.
Yeah.
And so if you stay in that warm relationship instead of hitting them with our winter sale, it's like, hey, remember this video? That share is still, you can still get a discount because that guy sat in it. And so if you just kind of follow them, and that's more of what I'd like to hear from you about, kind of like your thoughts on that buyer journey.
Yeah. So you mentioned the funnel, okay? And I talk about the sales funnel too, but I have stricken that from my vocabulary for the most part.
Yeah.
Okay, because we have dehumanized our prospects. We call them MQLs, SQLs. They're a lead, they're falling through this funnel, are they ready to buy? They're just things, they're data bits, okay, that we measure. Okay, they're human beings. And if you ask them to tell you what they're up to, they're gonna tell you, I'm trying to solve a problem. Okay, they're out to solve a problem. So in a big complex journey, are we in trouble?
Now we can see you. So if you're napping, I see you.
So if you're in a big complex purchasing process, it's usually a team of people. They're collaborating together. We call it a buyer's journey on purpose because it starts and stops. Wrong turns are made. People join the team. People leave the team. Mistakes are made. And they need help. And so if you're a marketer and your content has the intent of helping them advance through the journey, all right, we're not calling people MQLs and SQLs. Are they early buyer's journey? What are they trying to learn about? You're going to talk a little bit about teaching. What are they trying to learn about? And if I really want to measure results, I'm saying, okay, did I teach them something? And did they move to the next level of the buyer's journey? They learned something. So there's a lot of different frameworks for the buyer's journey. I like to keep it, there'll be like 7, 9, 14 different stages. I like to keep it simple: early, middle, late. The late buyer's journey, now they want features and benefits. They're thinking about buying from you. Prior to that, they're going to be doing some comparisons. Okay, is this something that I want to build myself, or do I want to outsource it to somebody for services? And in the early buyer's journey, they may be becoming aware of the problem they have, or maybe a missed opportunity, something they're unaware of. They're going to learn about it. They're going to build a strategy to overcome that. And ultimately in B2B, it's to solve a problem that their business has. It means a lot to them. So if you're talking about, so I'll use the COVID. So Pfizer, in the very early stages of developing a COVID vaccine, they didn't even know what the formulation was going to be. Is it going to be a tablet? Is it going to be a droplet on the tongue? Is it going to be an injectable? Probably an injectable. They were kind of leaning that way. So they start lining up service providers because they didn't have enough capacity to manufacture all of this and put it in vials. And oh, by the way, we're going to be sending it to developing parts of the world, and they need pre-filled syringes. Who has that capacity? So you can imagine how many people were involved in lining up all those partnerships, all those purchasing decisions, very complex. Now I'll use a real simple one. We drink coffee in the morning, you're coming into here, and you go, gosh, my breath smells. I've got a problem. I've got to solve the problem. Let me go buy some mints. It's still problem solving, right? It may be a short buyer's journey, but it's solving a problem. So so the folks I work with, we don't talk about the funnel. We don't talk about a sales funnel anymore. We talk about the buyer's journey. Where are they? And how do we help them advance through that journey? And so Maurice was telling me earlier about education and the importance of education and how you create content around that. A lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
Okay.
We kind of do a double up, right? So I love TikTok, but I'm also like hardcore long form content. I love this stuff. And so what we utilize is what we call near real-time insights about our clients or customers for interest. And it sounds fancy, right? But really it's going on social media and kind of reverse engineering what our customers want to see, what they're actively posting about. So for the marketing folks in the room, if I wanted to target you, I would go on TikTok and see what marketing people are posting about. And then I would create content related to that, providing more contextual education to deepen your knowledge. And so TikTok lets us do this really wide thing where I can post a lot. If I post 12 times on TikTok in a day, it's a lot, but it's not a lot for the platform. So I can test a lot of creative really quickly, but I'm not gonna post 12 podcasts in a day. That's ridiculous, right? Nobody's listening to that 45 minutes each. But what I can do is take the context that I put across 12 different TikToks, compress them down and create one long form podcast episode that makes me the authority on the subject. And so when we were talking out in the hallway, and it's really about creating things that allow me to be in front of you and be the resource for the questions that you need answered that may be tangentially related to what it is that I'm selling, right? So for us, with the podcast production, the problem you might be having now is, how do I get more eyeballs on my content? But I'm not necessarily thinking about podcasting. And so if I talk to you about podcasting, your eyes are gonna glaze over. But if I talk to you about how to increase your views on TikTok by 70% with one small change in the first 3 seconds of your video, now you're like, okay, I'll at least give you the 15 to 20 seconds that it takes for you to talk about that, and I've now earned the ability to continue to show you TikToks or continue to send you podcasts or whatever else.
Yeah, excellent. Aaron, so we were talking the other day over a cup of coffee, and then we went out and bought mints, by the way. So we were talking about, one of the things we both notice is when people begin to adopt this as a change, as a way of doing their marketing, they get contact information, and then they throw it over to the sales, and then sales has to follow up. But it's a different kind of follow-up. Can you talk a little bit about that and how to orchestrate that sales follow-up that's aligned with where the buyer is in your journey?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of responsibility that marketers have because we're in perception hacking. So we have all the tools. We have psychology, we have all the insights, we have the psychophysics and everything we get from data. And the context of our conversation was talking about, if you're marketing for a business, you don't believe in the product. Now sales, it's just like always be closing. But marketing, it's like, man, in my gut, do I feel like I really want to push this? And like, there's products where it's like, maybe I don't like it, who cares, it's my job. But there's other things that you might actually be objectively against. And so I just feel like marketers right now have a pretty heavy responsibility to drive a lot of what's happening in social media, because it's about a lot of echo chambers, and it's a lot of different things where perception is reality, and what you're consuming all day and the content we're putting out is going to dictate a lot of people's moods throughout the day. And so I personally feel like a lot of responsibility of what kind of content do I want to put out? Do I want to push these products? Do I want to do, XYZ features? Or do we want to find a way to help a brand enrich someone's life? And that's where you can really build that trust. So those are the types of things you think about of like, when we talk about with our clients, user stories. So it's a big thing in product development. So if you're building an app, you want to understand who your user is. So you create a user story. And you can do this for a couple different characters, like 3 to 4 characters, something like this. And we've done this for our tech where we would say, okay, who is someone in your audience? What's the demographic? 34-year-old female? Okay, what's her name? Molly? All right, how much money does Molly make? Okay, $75,000? Okay, what kind of car does she drive? Is she married? Does she have a dog? Does she have a cat? What kind of food does she feed that dog or cat? Is it natural, or does she buy it off the shelf?
Love it.
She take her to the park? And so you get to know them in depth. And so we would actually build out these user stories, and we'd put pictures of Molly in the bathroom. Not like in a weird way, but like just so you're like constantly like in the put her in the cafeteria. So you're like, who's Molly? Like who am I talking to? Same thing with Mike, who's 46. Yeah. He's actually divorced, but he's still
Mike in the bathroom.
Yeah, got a picture of Mike just staring at you. And I don't even putting Mike and Molly in the but,
I'm uncomfortable with Mike in the bathroom.
Yeah, so talking about being a rebel, but no, you really understanding like who the people are, and it goes back to, it's like KPIs. It's like really, it's more like key people indicators.
Nice. Nice.
And so that's really the stuff that as a marketer, like when we go in there, when I say documentary style, I usually go in extremely unprepared, and that sounds really, because they're like, so what are we doing? I'm like, I don't know. Let me talk to this guy. Yeah, I'm not going to tell him what to say. And so we want to find an avatar, someone that volunteered to talk, but we don't script anything. And we'll do a call ahead of time. But whenever they ask us like, what's the script? What's the shot list? It's like, well, we're going to talk to him first, and then we'll figure out what he talks about, and then we'll put together a shot list, get some B-roll that goes with that. And so documentary style that's created for the purposes of marketing is a little bit uncomfortable for some clients. And I tell them all the time, when I oftentimes will be, they'll come back to me later because they didn't like what I have to say, of like, it's gonna take you like a year to build an audience. If you wanna go the organic route, and if you're in e-com and you're doing digital, it's a little bit different. But if we're talking about building brand affinity and things like that, it's gonna take some time. And you can have, we were talking about this earlier, like on the podcast, it might take time to build your podcast, but if you have someone actively in your funnel or in your part of the buyer's journey, then even that first episode can come out and they're going to be able to make a decision on you. So you don't have to necessarily build this new audience, but you can be putting out content and information that can help nurture the existing, efforts you're making and help people make a decision.
One thing common when I hear people who do storytelling like this or create any kind of content aligned with the buyer's journey, that process you talked about, which doesn't feel like a process, it's very uncomfortable, but it's common to all of them. Mm-hmm. We're going to kind of like sit around and talk about something. We're going to kind of scope it in, get the right language, how we're going to talk about this, and then we do the interview. Yeah. And it's very unscripted, and people are not comfortable with that. It takes a few cycles, doesn't it?
Yeah, and on the back end, we're really structured. So on the front end, we're very casual, and on the back end, we're structured. And so we, in our project management, for example, for documentary style content, and for all the different platforms. Now, I'll just say this, social media is a technology, not a strategy. Separate those, because you have to have a strategy, and then your distribution strategy is going to be a little bit different. So TikTok may or may not work for you. I mean, I think you should post on TikTok. Why not? If you're making shorts, especially podcasts. But we're very structured on the back end. We have a 6-step process on our workflow that we've created into ClickUp and done all these automations. But there's 6 steps. It's called Icicle, and there's the idea, the creation, the editing, and then we call it search or subtitles, really extracting the words, the transcriptions. And there's quality, and then it's live. And the reason why we break it down that way is because we have different stakeholders on each of those. So you have the person that's a strategist, you might have your film editor, and then you have quality control, copywriters, and they break it out for mass distribution. And so on the back end, we're extremely structured. We just know going in, we're going to limit ourselves if we say, here's our shot list. Now, if you're doing a commercial, that's one thing. But when we're trying to post for you every day of the week, I need as much content as possible. And we're going to dig. And kind of like a conversation like this, where we're unscripted, but you say something, I say something, and it creates a lot of dialogue. Now, you have to have good interview skills to a degree to get that content. But you go in, it's natural. It doesn't feel forced. And then you're able to go through with your content team, chop it up, get it distributed, and then schedule the next one and just scale good content. But that's where the brands get more comfortable, because they see the amount of content going out, the engagement going up. And I'm talking 0 to 100,000 followers, real engagement, real audience without really selling, but they are selling as a result. Yeah.
And so you're talking about libraries, like volumes of content for folks you're working with.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're posting every day of the week. We're posting long form, short form. Everything starts long form to get the short form, like podcasting, things like that are the way to really scale short form content. And there's a whole process for businesses where we're going to create a hook, content, call to action. That's one strategy or one type of content. But then there's also more of a podcast, documentary style, where you can clip that up as well. But every style of content and distribution platform, newsletter, it's all connected. It's all connected, and then it connects with the digital marketing side as well on a paid the spend.
Once people accept this, executing is pretty challenging. The one question I get most commonly is, well, what do I create content about? Yeah. Can you offer both of you, offer some best practices on how to determine that?
Yeah. So not to kind of go back to something that I heard here, I can't remember his name. He talked about the Big Seven. If you know what I'm talking about, tell him I'm giving him his roses, right? So that's one. But the clients that I work with, they don't have really big audiences, right? And quite frankly, they don't need them. One of my clients right now, one customer of his is worth over $100,000. So he doesn't need a ton of business in the course of a year in order to hit revenue targets, right? So the problem with that is when we launch a podcast, you only get 1 or 2 listens, and that can be psychologically disruptive, even though it could be the right thing. And so a lot of what we do, especially for B2B businesses that are trying to create an audience and produce ROI, is using interview style podcasting, right? Because you're not creating the content anymore. you're facilitating the documentation of someone else's voice. And that a lot of times will give you enough of a cadence and enough content of your own that even if you haven't discovered your voice before, after 20, 30 episodes, you kind of know what it is that you want to talk about. And now you can start to go to maybe some individual shows where it's you by yourself. Because I'm going to be real with y'all, if y'all want to start a podcast and it's just you, it's going to be challenging to keep people's attention for 25 minutes and you're just talking to yourself. But after you've done it for a while, it does get a lot easier for you to be confident to speak into that microphone and know that Molly or Mike is sitting on the other side. They're probably in their bathrobes, but they're sitting there, and you can have that conversation with confidence and not feel silly, right? That's what a lot of my clients that want to do individuals are like, I have a really hard time sitting there creating this content, even though I have this like script. But it also lowers the barrier for content creation, right? So if I'm interviewing you, like you and I, we could chop it up for 30 minutes and then be like, hey, actually, we got to cut it because we got plenty that we can say, but we just don't have the airtime to do it.
And then you're reading the comments section, you're learning new things. Like I didn't even think about that, and it unlocks a lot of potential.
It provides an incredible amount of feedback.
Yes, we posted a YouTube video. Well, me and my team, we did a Google review, right? They launched their Google digital marketing course. My team was like, we should just take the course and see if it's any good. And when we posted it, like we got so many comments about like the quality of the video. And when I say quality, I don't mean the recording quality because it is not good. But the review, right? So now we know what we're going to post as far as like content wise for, honestly, we don't need to create another idea for all of 2023. They've told us exactly what they want us to post. And that happens often when we do things like podcasting. When we're clear of the objective and we post that content, especially with those micro clips on TikTok and things like that, people will comment like, hey, I'm interested to learn more about how do you generate leads or, how do I make my boyfriend love me again, right? That's a real comment.
Yeah.
I don't know why that stood out, but it did.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not looking at anybody in the audience, by the way.
Aaron, what are some of the things you do to answer the question from clients? Like, well, what do we create content about?
Yeah, there was one client that comes to mind where they were selling to school districts, and the number one pushback is budget. Shocker, right? We all have that problem.
Sure.
And so we were like, they actually wanted to start a podcast, and the CEO is super charismatic, like really funny guy, so it was like kind of a no-brainer. And so we leaned into the number one objective they get, and we called the podcast the Budget Cuts Podcast. And we just talked to school, like coaches, administrators about their budget issues. And so it had something to do with the product, because their product was something about fundraising, so aligned, but they just leaned into the number one objective. And so if you talk to them and kind of, I always like to start with a brand workshop to understand like the brand archetypes. So you're seeing archetypes going across the screen right now. If you understand what your brand archetype is, like, are you MLK who's going to lead a nation? Are you Indiana Jones who's kind of that lone wolf that's going to do his own thing? You have to understand your personal brand archetype, how you fit. Then it helps you understand, okay, what can I be a domain expert on and talk about? So we'll spend a lot of time on a workshop. Sometimes it's about adjacent things, and sometimes it's common objectives. But it's oftentimes workshopped in that way. But we don't want to just do what all the competitors, the competition's doing, what the trends are doing, because only dead fish go with the flow. And so you want to do something a little bit different. And so we will usually ignore competitors and then do competitive analysis and see like, okay, where do we align? But we don't want to be biased going into it. And so there's just a different process of extracting those ideas.
Dead fish go with the flow. That's really nice. I'm gonna.
That's not original, but
Okay, all right.
It's like I'm going to steal that.
I read it.
Fine.
Read it in a book or something.
One of the things I do is I ask questions of the client, similar to what you guys talked about, in really big, complex, scientific kind of relationships that are being developed. I ask, what problem does your target audience have that you solve better than your competitors? All right. How do they describe the problem? What's their terminology that they use? Are they aware of the problem? If they're not aware of the problem, that's going to take your content into more of an educational theme. If they're aware of the content, then you can just highlight, how much does the problem cost them? How much, if they solve it, how much money will they save or time will they save? With drug developers and med device developers, most of them are in it because of a heart issue. They are passionate about helping some group of patients. I know they don't have that reputation, but most of the people I work with, they really believe that. That is a great way to connect with them on who are they serving. There's another so if this doesn't seem really hard to understand, it isn't. Okay, we're not using a lot of weird technical terminology or anything like that. And the reason it's easy to understand is because we're all buyers too. We use the same process, right? We go about it. If we're going to buy a car, what do? We were talking earlier, used to be, I'm a Chevy guy, I'm a Ford guy, It's not like that anymore. So you're making EVs. I like the environment. This is cool. There's a different approach to developing partnerships with suppliers. Before we I've got a couple more questions, but I want to give. Are there any questions from you? Does anybody have a question? I can't see very well, even without the lights. So I'll tee up another question for you guys. So one of the other hardest things to do is you got an executive who's my age, who believes this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is going to take me longer, okay? And I just want leads. Yep. How do you overcome that objection when you're trying to explain this to somebody?
Yeah. The first side of that is I don't. If I have to really try to convince an exec that this is the right move, it's not going to work. Because there's too much resistance. But if I have an exec that's like, it sounds cool, but I need to be able to articulate the business value, then we really do get into some more number stuff. Like, I know I'm up here sounding like, just kind of just do whatever and it works. No, we don't rock like that. Like, I started my marketing journey as a performance marketer. So I still care about ROI and making sure that it's going to generate some business. So we look a lot at, number one, what is your audience size so we can set realistic expectations? What business you're in, because again, if your sales cycle is 24 months, then asking a podcast to produce a customer in 2 is ridiculous, right? And then we also look at the value of an individual customer, because if working with you means that I have to generate 100,000 customers on your podcast in a year for you to get ROI, we don't want to work with you because that barrier is way too high, right? So we work with people that have really long sales cycles, really high customer value that, 3 to 5 customers in a year is a win, right? So when I'm communicating it, those are the things that we talk about. And honestly, a lot of times at the end of the meeting, I'm like, this isn't for you. And maybe you want to start a podcast and we can do that, but working with us in our more concierge is not it, right? I can consult with you and show you how to set it up, but one of the greatest things about this talk was like, one size fits all doesn't work, right? So when I'm presenting solutions, it's like this, we need to understand that at the end of this meeting, we may come to the conclusion that working with me is not the right move, and investing a ton of money into podcasting may not be the best thing for your business at this time. But there may be something else that you need to look at, and maybe talking to somebody like Aaron would be a better fit for what your business needs than per se the podcast.
Yeah, everyone's strategies and product are very different. I mean, your point's dead on about if they don't believe in it, it's going to be hard. You're going to be, having to prove yourself constantly, which I'm not saying you shouldn't have to prove yourself, but it's going to be more of just a lot of friction in the relationship. Because I don't work with everyone that we meet with. Sometimes I'm like, this isn't a good fit on our end. But I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier on a lot of the best practices follow-up. Because we're talking about marketing. And yes, marketing at the end of the day is to help drive sales. But that's not always the metric that you're leaning towards. Sometimes campaigns are purely branding, where it's how many impressions did we get? And so you have to make sure you're aligning on what are the objectives. Is the objective of this campaign to raise money, to sell product, to XYZ this? Or is it, I need X amount of impressions because I sponsored this event and we only got about this many impressions, and you can get me 10 times more. So it's, what is that KPI that you're actually trying to measure? And then we always try to follow things up with as much of the journey as possible. And so, a newsletter is a big part of what we do. So we're trying to get people into, get their contact information, and then we put them into not necessarily a sequence, because we've done sequences where you have people put into tags and you're sending them a 7-step email sequence based on the buyer intent of hitting this button, and then they didn't. And so we have all these super technical stuff where you're putting PHP on your page just so that you can write code to tag the right person. And we had one SaaS product where sales fell off a cliff when we instilled more of an automated sell technique, where it's like, okay, eject them if they don't buy after the 8th point of contact type of thing. And we were doing a newsletter before, and we went back to the newsletter where it was just a manual storytelling every week. And since then, we have grown on that SaaS product 14% month over month, and I think it's 35% year over year. And so there are data points you can point to. There is sales you can point to. And where do we get those? Well, it's not necessarily from the 100,000 views a month that channel's getting on YouTube. That's great. It's, okay, well, we're getting that many views. Now we're getting 3.5% conversion on the email opt-in form. And then of the people that opt into the form, another 7% are creating an account. And of that, and then you break it down, and that gets into like more of a tech product. But if you have all the best practices in place, you start applying a lot of intelligence into your marketing. And then it goes back to, instead of being so scientific, you got to be a bit of an alchemist. And so a lot of the content we put out, I don't ever tell people, this is what's going to work. I go, I have a hypothesis. We're going to test it. I might be 0 for 6, but that 7th one might go viral. And virality is not the goal, okay? Like, virality is great, but if you can go viral for the wrong thing. I know one guy he's in the religious space. He went viral for like a woodworking thing. And now all people want is woodworking, and it totally ruined his page because his content's something else. So you can go viral for the wrong thing. And I don't want to kill all the time, but I think putting best practices and being able to communicate that is where you can be a little bit more comfortable on the back end. But we got to have fun with marketing and get creative.
When did you ever hear a marketer talk about a hypothesis, right? It's A/B testing. That's what we do. So I love that. Prove or disprove something. I had one, so we're running really short. We're going to get the hook, but the music hasn't started playing yet. So I had a head of marketing who had a CEO that didn't support this, and she wanted to adopt all of this. But they were doing trade shows. He liked trade shows because it made him feel good, but they really weren't. They weren't really delivering what they wanted. So she narrowed this into a trade show experience. They did a white paper in advance of the trade show. Great distribution, great level of engagement, and then followed it up with, come and meet the author at our booth. And they got all kinds of people coming to their booth wanting to meet the person who was talking. I think it was about flexible pharmaceutical manufacturing. And they were really interested. That was an appropriate follow-up to that. And that worked. Once he saw that win, then he gave her a little bit more. And he gave her a little bit more. So it was just a bunch of incremental wins over a period of a couple of years, and then she got everything she wanted.
Before they come and hook us off, on page 53, there's a link that you can go to and get a white paper essentially on how to do this like podcasting process.
Nice.
I'd love for somebody to be my client, but it's like that's the juice, right?
Any final questions or anything? If you like, we love to talk to people. We learn every time we get questioned by somebody because they challenge what we're saying. And so bring it on. We love to hear your thoughts.
Ask anything. I won't hold anything back. I'll give it all away. I promise.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank y'all.